we realized that there are about 3 different ways that we can create tables that are just kind of table containers that we then could add content to. But what if we already have content? Remember my motto of typing is bad? So the question becomes, how can we use what we already have without creating the empty container and then doing something like copying and pasting or retyping each piece of data that we already have into different cells in the table? The answer is simple, and that is to convert the text. Converting the text starts off very simply by having content that we already have in our document. Now, of course, we don't want to do typing, so let's use our navigation pane to find our first table. Just like we had for lists, I put some placeholders in this document, and we can find that by doing the less than sign, the word table, and then greater than. This should bring up several different returns. In this case, it gives us 6. And we want to select the very first one that's going to take us to page 5, Management and Personnel. Since we're not going to need this label anymore, we can go ahead and select it and get rid of it. The next step that I want you to do is actually to turn on your non-printing characters, or the Show Hide button. Remember, this is on the Home tab in the Paragraph group, and it looks like the little paragraph symbol. By turning this on, we can see what types of non-printing characters we have in this text, and this is actually absolutely critical to convert text to a table. Tables need to know where a column should be and where a new row should start, and it's going to do that using different symbols. For example, under Management and Personnel, we have our titles like Position, Salary Compensation, and Staffing. Between each of those, there is a single tab stop, and at the end of each row, there is a hard return where we used Enter. This is what Word is going to use to determine how it should organize this into a table. Each tab stop represents a new column, and each hard return will represent a new row. So it always is a good idea to take a look at this before you do the conversion. Otherwise, it's not hard to undo it and fix it later, but this will just save you that extra step. So we should have 3 columns per line: Position, Salary, and Staffing. The President CEO, there's a tab stop, gets base plus 4%, tab stop, 1 person. Organizational Director, there's a little tiny tab stop in there that's hard to see, but it is there. We don't want to add any extras because the extra would actually move base plus 1% of net sales to the last column. So Organizational Director, base, 1 full-time. Right now this is breaking across a page, which is okay. We just need to scroll down to see it. Client Relationship Specialist, 10%, 2 full-time. Instructional Facilitator End User, base plus performance. Here's where we see our first problem. After base plus performance bonus, there's a hard return, which means as negotiated would actually be down on the next row, and the last column of the previous row would be empty. We'll just do a little bit of cleanup here. Let's go ahead and press the delete key. Maybe do a comma to separate this. And then we should be able to see that base, performance, bonus, as negotiated all is in one column, and 2 staff full-time is the next row. Hard return is perfect, but then we run into the same kinds of issues here. Now we need to come down and talk about contract instructional facilitators. So again, after the word contract, we'll get rid of that hard paragraph return. Make sure that our spacing is correct. Then a tab, base plus performance bonus. Again, as negotiated needs to be fixed. And then the last column, 2 staff full-time. Then we'll do the same with contract receptionist. Base and 1 full-time equivalent. With those few little things done, which I know seems like a lot of work, but trust me, here's where it gets really easy and fast if you do this now, instead of trying to do it later. Since we're already at the bottom of the list, I'm simply going to press End, but I want you to notice that it does not include the end paragraph mark. Because when we create a table, this end paragraph mark is important, we need to be careful that when we select, we do actually select it. And we can see that by doing it by either using the keyboard or by dragging, we don't get that. So let's do this the right way. And now you know that I don't use that word very often, but let's do it from top to bottom instead of bottom to top. We can either click and drag, or we can do click, shift, click. Let's go ahead and click before the word position, scroll down using our mouse, Then hold our Shift key and click After one full time, making sure we include that paragraph mark. And now the easy part. Back to the Insert tab, Table drop-down, and we're going to choose Convert Text to Table. Small little window comes up, and if everything is formatted correctly, we shouldn't have to touch anything. It recognizes there are 3 columns. It recognizes there are 7 rows. It does give us our auto-fit behavior. Let's go ahead and do auto-fit to window. But the most important part of this particular process or method is at the very bottom where it says Separate Text At. Again, if we formatted things correctly, Word should already recognize that our columns are designated by tab stops, not paragraphs or commas or anything else. We want to make sure that this is correct, because if it's not, it's probably not going to be configured right. In our case, it is, so all we have to do is say OK. And here's where I told you it got easy, right? As we look at our table, by simply scrolling up in the document, everything is now nicely configured in its own little compartment where it has the position, the salary, and the staffing. Since I'm not really into cutting and pasting and certainly not into typing, this is much easier than trying to convert text in any other way. Unfortunately, a lot of people just don't know that you can convert text to tables. The only trick, if you would call it a trick, is turning on those non-printing characters and making sure that the text is actually configured correctly before you do the conversion. If for some reason that conversion didn't go quite as you wanted, no worries. One option is to simply click your Undo button or to use Control-Z. We love undo. The other option, though, is to realize that we do have some table tools under our contextual tabs, the Design tab and the Layout tab. If you look at the Layout tab, on the far right, under the Data group, there is an option to convert to text. So if you already have a table and you want to put it back into text for some reason, or if you do a little bit of work here and don't necessarily want to undo all of that editing that you did, you can convert to text, which is a little bit different than using undo. Either way, though, we can kind of move back and forth as necessary, but we want to do that as little as possible. So plan ahead, take a look at your text, and then make your conversions, and when you do that, it really is a very simple